What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude, and we have our very first recurring guest on this channel. And thank God it's Monday podcast. It is Sanctioned Ivan, the very first guest of this podcast, of these interviews. And guys, you showed a huge interest in the comment section to bring him back. That is why this is the only one single main reason why he is back here. I'm just kidding. We're good friends already, so he's gonna come back here eventually at some point, even more. So yes, welcome back, Ivan. Not gonna ask you the very same question to introduce yourself, because once again, people have been watching you already. They know you, they've seen the podcast. Just a couple of words. How was your last couple of months? How are you doing? How is living outside of Russia for you?
Well, first of all, thank you very much, bro, for having me for the second time on your channel. This means a lot to me that people are actually interested in what, I got to say and you got to say. So thank you very much, everybody, for this. What can I say about my life? It's good because, first of all, obviously, you don't hear the rockets, the drones, and, all the propaganda going into the ears. So I'm thankful that I could stay away from all of that. And I think we're privileged to be outside of this whole madness. Although, looking at the news nowadays, you don't know where the madness really ends, if any country doesn't have any madness. But yet, once again, thank you very much. And don't forget to subscribe to the Russian Dude and hit the like buttons right now.
Yes, do the same for Sanctioned Ivan. Go ahead, check his channel, subscribe, posting daily, posting regularly. So we're gonna appear on this channel many more times. And we are excited for you guys to hear our experience and hear our knowledge. And if you can even call it knowledge. But okay. Now let's get back to the serious stuff. Last interview, you've been talking about your process of moving outside of Russia, staying outside of Russia. I'm not going to force you to come back, obviously, but let's talk about this hypothetical scenario if you're coming back at some point and things like this, what your perception changed about Russia since the invasion. Things like this we're going to be talking about in today's, once again, podcast/interview. Still hasn't decided what exactly it is, but you get the idea. Let's begin then with the first question. Once again, how your perception of Russia changed. What were you thinking about Russia before the invasion, and how did it change since the invasion started?
Well, that's a good question considering the fact I'm 26 and when the invasion started, I was 23. So if you kind of put that into a perception, when you're 23-year-old, well, even 26, you're a really young guy that has no clue at what's going on. So, if you guys didn't know, just a little bit of history before we get into it. Most of my life at that point, I actually lived in Ireland. I went to school there. So I was just only probably like 5 years into living in Russia. And I thought that everything was great. Obviously, it had some problems, but I didn't really look into all of that whatsoever. I was not really into politics. There's a lot of memes about Russian people like, I'm not into politics. But, I was just trying to have a good time since I was, a young guy. So I didn't really look into it. But obviously, when the invasion started, that's when I had something click in my brain. I'm like, what is going on? How is this possible? Because for the first time, I could not believe at what is happening, because I heard about the training at the border of the Ukraine, and I thought, all right, just the typical training. They're going to be training around there and moving back. And at the time, I was working in an American car shipping company, moving cars around the States. And there was a lot of Ukrainians working in that company as well. So we would be all in like a big Skype call, and all of this happened, and nobody could believe that. The Ukrainians couldn't believe it. The Russians couldn't believe it. It was just a wild, big mess. And obviously, I was startled at first. I didn't even know what to think. But from day one, I actually was really against it. And if somebody somehow finds my Facebook, on the first days of the invasions, I have said a lot of negative things about that.
Like you did mention, a lot of Russians, a lot of Ukrainians, we work outside of our own countries together. Me personally as well, I play hockey. I also worked in US, in Canada. I did have some co-workers which were either Ukrainians or Russians, mostly obviously from those countries where I worked for. And yes, my very first week of the invasion, the Russian propaganda was saying, oh, that's it, like Russia is against the world. Don't even dare to show your face outside if you're Russian, outside of Russia. Nothing like this ever happened. It is just me adding a little bit of my own experience to what you basically said. Every single person as one, like for example, my Floridian hockey team, the next day after the invasion, I think most of the team texted me, how are you doing? Are you safe? How's your family? It was not like this. Are you an invader? Don't even dare to show up your face next to our hockey game. Like, we do not want you. You're expelled from hockey team. Nothing like this ever happened. This was the very first, my own, I would say, experience when the Russian propaganda was telling, I mean, it was always telling mostly lies, but this was the very first case of the obvious lie, the one that did not happen, never happened, but they said this is what is happening to Russians outside the country. Never happened, guys. And once again, if you're American, Canadians, any other European country, and if you did not immediately change your perspective about Russians, at least not every single one of them, since the invasion started, for this, guys, huge thank you. Because thank you for differentiating that being Russian does not mean that every single one of us supports Putin or the invasion or any stupidity like this. So glad to hear that your experience was more or less the same, I guess I would say, Ivan.
There was a situation when, on the second or the third day, when the invasion of Russia into Ukraine happened, and surprisingly enough, the company I worked in was majorly Ukrainian. There was Ukrainian owners. Obviously, it was kind of like operating in the United States, but everybody was hired from, the East, because you could, pay them $7 an hour and they will work for it. So there was a few Ukrainian people that said some really nasty things, which, you could imagine if you're getting your house shelled and stuff like that. But what surprised me the most was the managers of the company, who were also Ukrainian. They tried their best to keep the company apolitical until, well, the Russians had to leave because, first of all, the sanctions, the SWIFT got blocked. They were trying their best to keep everybody together in the company, although there was obviously huge tensions inside. The A lot of Ukrainians who were speaking Russian all the time, like, there was only one Ukrainian lady that actually spoke Ukrainian all the time. And, from the invasion day, even the people, the Ukrainian that didn't know Ukrainian, they were like, okay, this is going to be a sign of protest, obviously. And they started learning Ukrainian and speaking Ukrainian. But nevertheless, you could feel the tensions rising, but Ukrainians themselves try to, make it kind of work out somehow.
Yeah, tensions as well. So the place where we live in Canada is extremely Ukrainian populated. The very first days felt like, once again, because I was reading the news from the Russian side, from Ukrainian side, a little bit from the news from the West. And yes, once again, Russian side was saying that's it, like the Russians are outcasts, like we are once again a country against the entire world. So even going outside of my home, hearing all this Slavic speech, once again, this was Serbians and Russians, Ukrainians, just of making me feel like I don't belong here. I need to be at home. Like it's the pandemic once again. Don't show up my face outside. But then the more I just go outside, interact with people, talk with them, or just hear them speaking. And yes, at first, another good thing you mentioned, the language. First couple of months, I would say, invasion, a lot of Ukrainian language. But before the invasion, they were speaking Russian because for them,
Yes.
this is the language they mostly even talk, I would say. And then 2 months passed, half year passed, and more I start hearing Ukrainians once again speaking Russian. So it's people are people. Like you see those people who live in Canada, most likely they do not support Putin, they do not like Putin, they do not like the invasion. Otherwise, why would they be outside the Russia and not just go and fight on the front lines? And yeah,
Well, I'll
once
tell
again,
you one
people,
thing.
yes,
I'm sorry. I'll tell you one thing, but you walk around Thailand, you go into a bar or something like that, you see Ukrainians and Russians drinking beer, having a good time. Meanwhile, the Russians and Ukrainians are fighting in Ukraine. So obviously, Russians and Ukrainians obviously want none of this, and we could be living a really good life. But one person can really change everything really quickly.
yes, thankfully for people like you, Ivan, for any other Russian Ukrainian YouTubers who do still see that every person is different. It does not matter if you're from Russia, you unconditionally support Putin. Because of this, I think we content creators, let's generalize like this, we do a very good and very important work of just keeping the, I guess, humanity maybe alive inside people. So we do not just generalize, we do not just stereotype people just from where we're born. And I think this is a very good thing that we are doing here on YouTube, all of us. So a round of applause for us. I would say it was very cringe, but okay. So yes, then maybe the next question, then in some way logical or not, if at some point, hopefully rather sooner rather than later, the war is over, are you planning to go back to Russia?
Well, it's funny you ask about this because I've been contemplating about this question for quite a bit now. I was thinking, what if the war just ends, and the way on the news you heard Trump saying, I want to sort out this war real quickly. And I was like, okay, what if he actually does figure it out, which is probably not going to happen because really nobody has a say in this except Ukraine and Russia. But for example, if it stops, but it's going to be like Vladimir Putin is still going to be the president, I would really have a hard time coming in because he already got the taste of full on power of the country where he could do whatever he wants and control the people. If he wants to block social medias, he does it. He could basically block the full country like North Korea and nobody would be able to leave. So, there's a really slim chance that I would return. But there is a high chance that I would be returning, for example, if the whole government changes and, it becomes a democratic country where there's going to be many more possibilities. I would be the first one to come back to make Russia a great place, show people from all around the world the Russian wilderness, bring them to Siberia and, all sorts of places to show them how beautiful the people are as well. Because a lot of people think that, Russians are evil and every single one of them are just horrible people. That's not the case. But, the government has to change because the government controls the media. So basically controls everybody. So yeah, it's very hard. But if it doesn't change, my plan won't change as of going towards the United States because that has been my plan for a very long time now.
So you did mention if the government changes and, like I'm assuming, obviously completely not a single one of the successors were appointed or selected by Putin. So basically, if everything completely, the whole mentality inside the Kremlin changes, in this case, yeah, I'm assuming a lot of very smart, a lot of dedicated, a lot of hardworking people will return and will start helping to rebuild Russia extremely fast. But what if, once again, like Putin is a mortal man, like that? I mean, that is not a secret,
Oh,
right? what if? What if, okay, he at some point passes away and he appoints, I don't know, let's say, so Dmitry Medvedev or somebody from his inner circle. So you're still gonna not consider returning to Russia while the same party, let's call it like this, the same people, the same inner circle is at power inside Kremlin. I don't think he will still come back, no.
you know, never say never, all right? You don't know how life can turn because there could be an emergency or I don't know. I still got, family living there and stuff like that. You never know. You never know what could happen. So if something happens and I have to fly is very important. Definitely I'm going to risk it and go. But if I don't really have to, then I won't.
Mm.
So
No,
I'm
no,
being
yeah,
completely honest here,
yeah,
just the
that
way it
is
is.
100%. That is
Yeah.
100% understandable if it's an emergency. I mean, like, yeah, pretty much almost every single one of us would go no matter what, take the chance. What I basically more meant is like almost more like permanent return to Russia. Like, you just go there and you stay there. I mean, assuming if you did not already plan your whole life in another country, like, if, like, are you still thinking that you might continue living permanently in Russia? This is what I kind of meant by that question.
I kind of would have wished that, because it's not a big lie. Everybody knows this. I love Russia. I love Russia, but I just hate the government. I love Moscow. I'm from Moscow myself. I could say one thing, out of all the countries I've been, Moscow has one of the best infrastructures ever. You just get anything you want at whatever time and all that stuff. So it's really built for people to live there very well. So obviously, I was planning to be living there, but unfortunately, with all this stuff happening, no. So yeah, it's a slim chance. I could, but probably not. It's probably like a 1% chance out of 100.
Yeah, safe bet, because unless it's a drastic change, it's always going to be a risk. The
Yeah.
next guy could have the same ideas as Putin, or Putin once again might be for a couple more decades. Who knows? With all the best medics he could afford, he might live in triple digits. So who knows? And
Yeah,
imagine the decisions he's gonna take when he's like 100-year-old plus. That's gonna
the
be
biggest problem is that, people do not learn history. And when they don't learn history, history tends to repeat itself. So that's the biggest problem as well.
That's very true. That's extremely true. And I mean, we are seeing it. Less than like what 80 years passed, it's just already repeating itself. Same very mistakes he is doing, same very decisions he's taking. It's like almost you can predict almost what he's gonna do next. It's like they're studying the past, trying to make it better, try not to make the same mistakes. But in the end, it's literally pretty much exactly the same.
Yep.
So yeah, history does repeat itself. So I'm assuming also, since you once again from Russia, Moscow, most of your relatives, friends are still in Russia, in some parts of Russia, or are they also like fleeing or in other countries, or most of them are still in Russia?
Well, most of them are still in Russia. Yeah, they just live a normal life there. Most of them are trying to, like, they're just working and trying to get by just like everybody. Because nevertheless, a lot of people, they comment about other Russians living in Russia, but try to put yourself in their shoes. Imagine you got a family, you got kids, and you're working an ordinary job. You don't even think about anything else but just to somehow provide for your family, have the kids get some food, and all that stuff. So it's very hard to put yourself in the shoes of anybody in any place around the world. So, but yeah, people are still living there. My family still lives there. A lot of the people I know still live there, but it's just because, not everybody has an opportunity to just get on an airplane, fly out, and work online.
That is a very good benefit of remote work, incredible one. So then those people, relatives and friends, do you kind of see them from time to time? Do they come visit you, or you maybe just FaceTime them, video call them, or anything like this? Do you keep in touch with them?
Well, I keep in touch with my family, and with my friends that I used to hang around in Russia, not so much. And not because like we have different political views, because most of the people that I spoke to in Russia, they're against all of this, but obviously they're not going to be walking around Moscow with like a piece of paper to get arrested straight away. So yeah, I still keep in touch with everybody.
That's perfect. And you did mention that most of them are more or less same politically as you. So do you think some of your friends or even relatives changed their perception of the invasion of Putin or Russia since the invasion started? Some of them started to be extremely opposing this, or some even became maybe supporters of this, or more or less everyone stayed the same? What do you think?
Well, I think, I can't talk about everybody that I spoke to, because I'm pretty sure some of them were brainwashed. Some of them are against it. My family, though, they've been against this government for since I was born, I
Mhm.
think. They've always, as I remember, have been only saying the bad things. And they kind of were saying that there's going to be a war. All this time since I was a little kid, my family has been talking about some sort of a war is going to happen. Here we go. So they kind of they've been always against the United Russian Party and Vladimir Putin himself.
I think we have similar relatives, to be honest, at this point, because like
You never
everything you
know.
say,
Maybe we could be brothers. You never
I
know.
know, I know, I know, because it is like literally listening about same thing about my family. So yeah, just to add, for me personally, I would say maybe one, two people they changed. So they were maybe like neutral or against Putin. So they're like, if they're forced to choose, they're against him. But after the invasion started, not immediately, but like what 3 years later, they kind of started like, well, maybe he's doing some right things, and like, yeah, that's like completely crazy for me to understand. But mostly those people who were against it before the invasion started, they became even more against it, and those people who are supporting him, they became more active politically, I guess. They were like, they actually started maybe going to this, like when they carried the portraits after May 9th parade. What was that? I forgot. The March of the
Yeah.
Endless, something like this. So yeah, things like this they started doing just to show their more support. They started to go to like patriotic concerts, listening to Lube,
Oh
which by the
wow.
way, which by the way, Lube, for some reason, that's like just couple of sentences so we don't deviate too much. For some reason, Любэ is like a national hockey, Russian hockey team songs for the locker rooms. Every
Wow.
single 90s kids who played hockey, we know almost every single Любэ song. Our coaches were putting them in our summer camps, in the locker rooms, after the game, before game. Like, yeah, it's like every 90s Russian hockey kid, ask him, he knows 90% of Любэ songs and all their lyrics. But yeah, once again, not to deviate too much from the topic now. So
I'm
yeah,
sorry, but I know
yes,
I'm a
yes, yes,
guest. I'm a guest on your show, but I got a question for you, right?
yes,
Because this is
yes, yes.
interesting. I mean, if you think about it, right, could you blame the Russian people who got brainwashed when there's literally propaganda coming out of every single crack and you're living maybe in the village somewhere, you know? I mean, could you really blame it?
No, obviously no. That is the thing, I guess, what keeps us more humane, I guess, than those angry Z patriots. We still never give up on them. Once again, we unfortunately have Z patriots among our relatives. So that is once again what makes us, I guess, different. Because for them, we family, that's it, we're the traitors, we're the outcasts, we're the ones who abandoned Russia, who abandoned our glorious, strong leader, who should never come back to Russia, don't even speak to us, don't even call to us, like they stopped congratulating us with everything, birthdays, New Year, all these things stop for
Wow.
us just simply because I started studying in America since 2015. 7 years before the invasion, I left Russia, and they perfectly knew well that I'm gonna try to stay in America, but for them, that's it. I'm a traitor. Simple as that. And my whole family is traitors as well. For us, we do not see them like this. We know that extremely brainwashed. We know that propaganda is literally out of TV, radio, internet, social media, games, TV shows, movies. Everywhere is the propaganda. So yeah, we simply cannot blame them. We understand that right now they're under the influence of propaganda, maybe other things, but
This
we
sounds
never give
like
up on them.
it sounds
We,
like a cult. The
yes,
Putin's cult.
we never give up on them. We know that eventually, at some point, hopefully, it's gonna happen. They gonna see the real side, like Germans. Like you ask Germans, most of them,
Yeah.
99% of Germans, realize who were they supporting 8 years ago, 9 years ago. So that's what hoping I'm
Well,
gonna
you know,
happen
I
in
gotta
Russia.
say, the Germans were very smart when they were handing out free radios to the citizens, so they could all they could be doing is listening to what the party was saying to them.
No, now it's even easier. So much
Yeah,
easier. Even
everybody
like
has
this,
a
there is,
TV everywhere, so
yeah, and that is the strongest source of propaganda. 90% of the strongest propaganda, I would say, comes from like first two, three channels. Channel one, Russia 24, and I don't know, TV3 or something, whatever like this, TNT,
yeah.
STS. That's all you need. And those things, they're being then spread into social media, Telegram channels, and everything. But this is where it all comes from. So yeah, cannot blame them. I know they are influenced right now, so hopefully it's gonna cure itself, or hopefully it's gonna just gonna realize that. I mean, how is it possible that we are the good guys if we are fighting in another country? I mean, that is just as simple as that. That's like, it's just common sense to understand.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, well, then speaking about, I guess, people from your side, from my side, some of them, maybe you have obviously a group of friends, but you obviously know way 10 times more people than other than your friends. There are friends of your friends of your parents, kids of friends of your parents, things like this. Do you have any of those people? Do you know any acquaintance or a friend who actually went to fight in a war in Ukraine?
That's actually a good question. So I actually knew this guy when I was a kid. He was like from, so I was like a little kid and he was kind of in the older crowd and the people who would kind of look up to him, be like, oh, they're cool. They got their ladders and they're driving around the place. And when I returned from Turkey to Russia, I was talking to my friends and I'm like, oh, where's that guy gone? And they're like, he was an alcoholic. Then he started gambling and then he was in debt and then he signed a contract and went into Ukraine into the rocket forces. And I'm like, what? That's insane. Why would he do that? And, he did even post on his Instagram like photos of him standing beside I'm not a military guy, so I don't even know. Like, it looked like a Katyusha kind of thing, that shoots like a bunch of rockets out. And I was like, that's insane. There's just no way that, how. And he comes from a relatively well off family. You would have never thought, but he got into debt. The banks were calling him up. So the only solution for him, probably in his head, was let me go sign up the contract. I'll go for, I don't know, for how, I don't even know for how long you sign it up for, get the money, pay off my debts, probably like buy a car or something. And that's pretty much it. But I think that's probably one of the stupidest things he could do. And I haven't talked to him for, I think, like 7 years. So I have no idea. I just saw the photos. I knew who he was. And that's the only person I know of.
Yeah, there's no way to obviously justify clearing your debt or making money in this way, especially knowing that like it's not all easy. You sign a contract, they promise you to erase your debts up to 10 million, then I don't know, 5 million sign a bonus, 200,000 per month salary, blah blah blah. Like rarely all this money ever reaches the pockets of those soldiers. There are always conditions, terms and conditions, small print. Then the generals, officers also, they like to
Well,
not
I
to
mean,
send
you're
you into
not,
the mirror souls.
he's not out of the smartest bunch, considering the fact that he was
Mm-hmm.
gambling and
Yeah,
drinking all the time. So obviously, if he was a little bit smarter, he wouldn't even put himself in that situation in the first place.
100%. But yeah, in no way this is ever justified. So this is pretty much the only example you have of those people who
Yeah, that's
went to war.
the only person that I've kind of known, and that's the only. Maybe there's others, but I don't really have a big group of people that I talk to, so I'm not
Yeah,
even sure.
yeah, because in the beginning, I think it took what was it, September, I think, right? So from February to September, this was like 7 months. It took 7 months our family for war to reach us. So first it was like two guys from my father's business. They were drafted in this September mobilization. One unfortunately got killed, another one concussed. So he is like back in Russia, I'm assuming, with concussion, permanent concussion. So I mean, yeah,
Oh
as you
wow.
can see, chances of survival or not being injured are very low. And then it just started happening very frequently. So 7 months for the first one, and then maybe half year for the next one, 4 months. Then in 3 months, I learned somebody else is in the war. 1 month, and then like yeah, just now, my sister kindergarten friend is fighting. I don't know, my
Wow.
another guy from my father's company got killed already like less than 2 months at the front lines. My best from university got killed 1.5 year after fighting in Ukraine. It's like, yeah, at this point, once every 1 2 months you hear somebody's at the war and either injured. Another of my sister's friend lost a leg. So literally, I think maybe one guy from all the acquaintances I have between me, my parents, my friends, my sister, only two guys are uninjured, but are still fighting in Ukraine. They're either being in this house called like vacations, let's call this like this, because you cannot
Yeah.
fight just forever. But yeah, 80% of them are either injured or dead. So the casualty rate is extremely high in Ukraine. So all this Russian propaganda, and once again, what I was maybe trying to kind of summarize everything by saying this thing is that once again, propaganda will never tell this. Like propaganda tells like, go glorious thing to do. You're gonna become a millionaire, brotherhood. You're gonna eat tushonka next to the campfire. It's gonna be easy money for you. But then the reality is 80% of people either never come back physically or mentally from that place, and that is scary. And the more people feel it directly, the more families experience it directly, the more they will start realizing that, wait a second, looks like whatever we're doing is not heroic, it's not patriotic, it's not us defending Russian people in Ukraine, it's just some madman's war that we should not even participate in the first place. So hopefully more people will learn it soon.
Actually, you know what? You were talking about this, and my girlfriend is actually, she flew over to Russia to, go to her grandparents because, a lot of people are like, oh my God, she's going to Russia. But, anyways, grandparents, they don't get younger, and there's not much time left that you could be with them. So I was like, go ahead, First of all, you're a girl. There's like 0.001% chance something will happen to you. So go ahead. You got to spend time with family. So she went over, and her family lives in the Far East, closer to like, like Vladivostok, Siberia type of thing. Well, somewhere in the Far East. I'm not sure where. Anyways, nevertheless, she did say that area is obviously like small village. And she said that nearly every single day there would be a coffin coming into the village from like some guy that signed up to a contract or got mobilized. So she saw a lot of coffins just every single day coming back to get buried. She was just like, this is insane. So many people just dying, you know?
Yes, coffins a lot. The cemeteries, they just expand exponentially. The cemeteries, which used to be just some local church cemetery, are now 90% bigger, with just pretty much military, with just soldiers being buried, with the flags from the Ministry of Defense of Russia. So sorry for your sacrifice, this kind of stuff. So yes, maybe at least not, hopefully, families will experience the loss directly, but once again they start seeing it, that the usual cemetery, the usual church they're going to on, I don't know, Sunday masses, and now it's like just literally just a field of graves, all filled and just expanding, and there's like 20 new fresh ones waiting to be filled literally within the next week. So hopefully this is what will make eyes of Russian people open sooner than
But
later.
you know what? You're talking about eyes opening. Obviously, I'm not going to be mentioning the village or anything like this, but I'll tell you one thing, right? She did tell me that the older people there, they started saying, like, we don't want this happening. Like, we don't even want to be in Ukraine. Why are we doing this? And in most cases, they were saying, like, oh, they should be sending, their own kids from Moscow over to there. They're getting somewhat angrier and angrier, and people in their own kitchens, they would kind of like meet up somewhere and talk about this, without anybody hearing, like not on the streets. They kind of like, why are we doing this? Like, oh, my kid got killed or this and that. So people are like, they're seeing something, they're getting a gist, something in their brains starting, the gears are starting to turn. You could imagine like spider webs everywhere and just the gears starting to like, what are we actually doing? What like, this doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So it's happening in the Far East right now, which I found insane. I kind of would have imagined that it would start happening more often in Moscow. Maybe I just have not heard of it, but definitely people are starting to question themselves about what the heck is happening right now.
That's perfect. Hopefully, it spreads as fast as propaganda does, because I mean, yeah, this is a life-changing event when you know somebody you've been a good friend with, or even especially, unfortunately, your
Yeah.
relative, and then
But
he just dies.
most
It's
important, it's the older generation. That's what amazed me the most. It's like the people who are like 67 years old, babushkas and dedushkas, talking about this. This is insane for me to hear because they're like the easiest to brainwash.
Well, hopefully this was also then easy for them to be unbrainwashed, and so. But yeah, I mean, I would also think that this will be the last age group category of people in Russia who will be the last ones to find the common sense once again. So very, very good to hear that some of them they actually do, especially from remote regions and not from the major cities. So there is hope. That is a
Yep.
very
Always hope.
promising. And now the question, quick answer. I guess you know what's coming. If you're in front of Putin, what will you tell him?
Oh, you stole that from a Russian YouTuber that I stole. Unbelievable here. What would I ask Putin if I was in front of him? I would ask, are you not tired of being in this position? Like, why are you doing this? Obviously, I would ask him, do you have a body double? And I would be like, do you not want to just go somewhere, or you like, I don't know, something like that. Do you have internet? Do you see what people are saying about you? You know, something like that.
That's it. That's pretty much it then. As always, we just end this abruptly to keep the retention high. So thanks so much, Ivan, for participating. It was a pleasure to talk to you again. It's very nice to hear that there are many people like us inside Russia, outside Russia, that there is still hope. And most importantly, that you say that some, at least some, there is a very first older generation people who started changing their mindsets. That was amazing to hear. So as you can see, guys, Russia is still not beyond being saved. So there is still hope. There is always hope. Thanks much for watching. Thanks much. It was a Thanks God It's Monday podcast. Ivan, the Sanctioned Ivan, was the guest. Thanks much for watching. See you tomorrow.
See you guys later.